Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson-Miller, and a very special welcome to our viewers on onespotmedia.com. Well, over the past few months, there has been a lot of discussion about the primary exit profile. That's the assessment exam that is going to be replacing the grade 6 achievement test. Recently, the youth minister in the Ministry of Education gave some results of a recent mock exam for one aspect of the PEP, which again raised concerns. We're going to be talking about some of the issues this evening, and joining us in studio, we have principal at the Gregory Park Primary School, Richard Williams. Also with us is Senior Technical Coordinator in the Ministry of Education, Marlon Morgan. Also, we have the opposition spokesman on education, the Reverend Ronald Thwaites, and Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment Specialist, Michael Anthony Dobson-Lewis. Before all of that, though, let's go to this overview.
Schools complained that their students weren't ready for the primary exit profile test, PEP, but the Education Ministry has been insisting that's not true and that teachers and students are prepared for the replacement of the 20-year-old grade 6 achievement test, GSAT. In June, 37,500 students got a first glance at what the test could look like. The results for the performance task mock exam, not so good. But in the version of the results presented in October by Education Minister Ruel Reid, the results didn't appear too bad.
83% of the students actually scored satisfactorily on this particular assessment. 48% had satisfactory scores for math, met or nearly met the standard. And for social studies was 52%. Science was of great concern. Only 22% had satisfactory score based on that particular assessment.
But the final official results looked very different. Get this, for math, only 3.7% of the 37,500 students met the standard. 46.8% nearly made it. It gets worse. Just 1.5% of the students mastered science and 37.7% almost. In social studies, 7.6% made the standard and 51.9% almost got there. Language arts was better, but still nothing to boast about. 12,003 achieved mastery and 60% nearly met the standard. State Minister for Education Floyd Green presented the results in Parliament.
The students know the information, but they have a difficulty in applying the information.
The opposition spokesman on education, Ronald Thwaites, reacted.
The performance of students in this mock exam are frighteningly dismal.
The education minister believes students will do better on the real test.
What it says is where you are. Some persons are ready and some persons are not. So what you do, because I have been a teacher enough to know, in the final exam, sometimes the person do poorly on a mock. You see, when the final result come out, happen to me all the time. And the kids who didn't do so well on the mock, then do much better than those persons who did well on the mock. Because sometimes with the mock, having done well on the mock, you know what happened to them? Overconfident.
That is to be seen, but what is for sure is that there will be no more mock exams, according to Mr. Reid.
Thank you so much, Janello. Let me start off by asking Mr. Morgan to just explain for us as briefly as you can this issue of mastery and near mastery, because that seems to be at the center of the recent concerns.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Diane. The mock of the performance task component of the primary exit profile, which would have been administered in June to the cohort at the time in grade 5, they are now in grade 6, essentially had 3 levels in terms of the scoring. Standards met, standard nearly met, and of course, standard not met. Now, for all intents and purposes, there are 2 of those levels, being standard met and standard nearly met, that are indicative of acceptable scores. Yes, because in terms of the language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies, what standard met denotes is high achievement. Generally speaking, B plus to an A. So high achievement. And standard nearly met is in the order of C and a letter grade B. So it is not that you would have failed, you would have attained a satisfactory or an indicative acceptable score. So that's the distinction we'd want to make. Though the expression is standard nearly met, we're not saying that the score isn't satisfactory. And in terms of reporting, the minister would have done what successive education ministers would have done in terms of conveying those percentage of the cohort who would have attained acceptable scores. Because in respect of CXC, for example, when you look at CSEC, grades 1 down through to 3 are pass grades. But you would appreciate that each of those grades are indicative of different levels of achievement. A grade 1 in CSEC, for example, conveys something completely different from what a grade 3 conveys, although grades 1 through to 3 are effectively acceptable scores or acceptable grades in respect of CSEC.
And yet, Mr. Dobson-Lewis, my understanding of an article you wrote earlier this week in the Gleaner is that you don't agree with that. You don't think nearly met is satisfactory, and you don't think the comparison in terms of CSEC, in fact, is a fair analogy, correct?
Yes, correct.
Tell me why you say that.
Well, in the field of assessment, nearly met is like near mastery. And near mastery or nearly met or nearly meeting a standard cannot be considered acceptable performance.
What Mr. Morgan is saying, the standard means high achievement. So if you nearly get to high achievement, then you're doing okay. That's what he's saying.
I disagree. I totally disagree with that from an assessment standpoint. If another way of looking at the scoring then, you should have several categories then, instead of 3.
How so?
For example, you could have a category like excellent, above average, average, below average, unsatisfactory.
Mm-hmm. Why you don't think the analogy with CSEC is correct?
Okay, CSEC has 3 levels of mastery, grades 1, 2, and 3. So if you're comparing PEP nearly meeting the standard, the students nearly meeting the standards with grade 3, that is incorrect. If you compare nearly met with grade 4, I would accept that. Because grade 4, yes, grade 4 suggests that the students have not met the standard. They are nearly meeting the standard.
Let us not lose sight of some ordinary language elements here. Because if you think of it, a student like myself who attained a 3 in CSEC maths, I did CXC at the time, and I was thankful for my 3, weak in maths. You cannot suggest to me that that is somehow to even use the lexicon mastery. Because the truth is...
No, hold on. But with respect,
and there's a reason I'm using the illustration.
No, but I'm saying this can't be about regular language. Mm-hmm. Isn't there a specific way in which experts assess? Which is what I'm
absolutely.
trying to understand.
And in case of the PEP performance task, our assessment officers use these 3 levels in terms of the scoring. But I'm coming back to the illustration to try and underscore the point. A student who gets a 1, for example, in CSEC maths, is a student who obviously has grasped the concepts to a high level in terms of reasoning skills, computation skills, all of those skills as set out in the profile. Someone who has achieved grade 3 is effectively a mediocre performance. And it is no different for all intents and purposes for what we're conveying as a ministry when we speak of near mastery. So I vehemently disagree with the position that at CSEC, a grade 1, 2, and a 3, they are all categories of mastery. The truth is, grade 1 and 2 are high achievement scores relative to a grade 3, and of course, grades 4 and below are failures. And it is for that reason, for example, Dion, when someone gets a grade 3 in a subject at grade 11 in CSEC, their school oftentimes don't approve of them doing that particular subject at 6th form So you can seek to corroborate that with Mr. Dobson, Lewis.
Well, it depends which school you go, Mr. Dobson, Lewis.
And why would that be so? Why wouldn't a student
let me let him respond though to the point you are making that grade 3 is weak mastery, I think.
There are 3 levels of mastery,
yes.
3 levels of acceptable performance.
Yes.
So grade 3 is acceptable.
You cannot do biology at grade 12 and grade 13 if you're merely hobbled along.
But that's
in
not
terms
the
of
point.
no, it's a concept there.
No, it's not like we're going into the grocery store and taking up apples and oranges.
Both CSEC and PEP are assessments. We're agreed on that. All of those 2 assessments, and you can say the same for a university as well, have different levels of achievement. So in the case of PEP, there are 3 levels. Mastery, in terms of standard MEP and standard nearly MEP.
Yeah.
And at CSEC, you have grades 1 through to 3.
I'm going to stop you respectfully because I think you did make your point. Reverend Thwaites, comment on this particular issue?
Really no, because I'm surprised. The fact is that our children are not doing well. We have a problem in primary education. However you want to pass the results, we have a serious problem facing the nation, and we need to fix that. That's what I'm hoping we can discuss.
Yeah, but except that it's a different issue if we're saying only 1.5% of our students are achieving at a certain level as opposed to 52.5%. It's a completely different conversation,
sure.
Which is why this issue is actually important. But if you don't have any comment on it, Mr. Williams?
I just want to correct one
thing.
Certainly during my time as Minister of Education, near mastery and mastery were never brought together. They're always 2 distinct things. And the near mastery needs tremendous help to bring them up to the standard. What do we want for our children? Okay. We want the excellent standards.
And we'll talk about that in just a second. Mr. Williams, any comment on this before I move on? How do you regard it as an educator, mastery and near mastery?
It's 2 separate entities. And
what does it mean for you?
For me as principal, looking at the results, it was quite startling because then standard met and looking at I administered for grade 5, so I know what was anticipated. Looking at the results, what came back, it was quite frightening because then you coming from grade 4 literacy and numeracy.
Sorry, just before you go to that though, your understanding as an educator, when a child achieves near mastery as opposed to mastery, tell me what it means for you practically.
Practically.
For viewers to be able to
understand. The student would
understand.
have understood all the concept.
That's mastery.
Mastery. A mastery student would have understood all the concept to 80% or above, and a near mastery student is having some issues with some of the concepts.
Okay.
So would not have fully mastered and could not speak definitively on all areas of the concept taught.
So you said you found the results startling?
Yes.
Frightening, I think you said?
Yes.
Tell me why.
Let me backtrack. In 2016, we had the training in the new standards curriculum.
Yes.
And the focus then was on the 5 E's and a few mention of the 4 C's. So grades 1 and 4 teachers were trained with 7, 8, and 9, grade 7, 8, and 9. So we went to that training in that summer, and then the following summer, I think grades 2, 5, 3, and 6 were trained on the 5E, because this new curriculum would have brought us to the point where we're going to change the lesson planning.
What are the E's and the C's?
The 4 C's, creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration, which have become the pillars of the national standards curriculum. The 5E spoke to engagement, expanding, exploring, evaluation. So we're looking at that. But the focus in the training was mostly on the 5E, and as teachers, we are expected to do lesson planning. So that process was done.
Okay.
So the teachers are focusing on writing the 5E lesson plan and getting that structure, while not much emphasis was being placed on the 4 C's.
Hold that thought for a moment for me. Let me just go to our first break, and we'll come back and we'll pick up. And what do these results that we saw really mean? How much concern, if at all, are they for us? And we'll talk about that. Remember our text line, it's 8953999, 8953999. You can tweet me as well, DJ Miller JA. Our hashtag is TVJ All Angles.